Hello and welcome to Devcastops, a Hashicorp podcast. I'm James, and with me is Barnaby that side and Wale below me. And Wale, what is our first topic?
Just a quick update on the Vault Pro exam that most of us here have taken, which some of us have passed, and some are yet to find out the result.
Have you not found out
Have
about
Uh,
you
it?
got your result back? I don't know. I haven't
oh,
looked
have
at my
you,
emails.
yeah, check your email right here. So while you're doing that, I'll update you on my experience. So basically, according to James only took 2.5 hours,
Took 3 hours. Just over 3 hours.
almost just over 3 hours. Barnaby only took 3.5, right? Or two
Yeah.
and a half. While on the other hand, 5 hours, a whole 5 hours. So the exam is actually 5 hours,
What, there's
and
five?
yeah, it's
What?
5 hours. Yeah, and it was like 5 minutes left. That's when I finished. So I started at just past, I think maybe 11:20 p.m. or something like that, and I finished almost 4 a.m. I think it was like 4 already. I can't remember, but like all I know is I went to bed like maybe just almost 5 a.m. after
That,
finishing.
that is
So,
rough.
exactly. I'll definitely suggest not to do it when you're tired, like when you're lacking sleep, because your thinking does get impacted. But yeah, I struggled a lot, man. I spent 2 hours on the 21 questions,
Oof.
and then I spent most of my remaining hours on the um hands-on, and I struggled on the PKI one. Barnaby did try to hint that there would be a PKI question, but I just wasn't like I didn't think I wouldn't be able to even do anything. Actually, I
I,
wanted to, yeah.
I think it's really interesting the test because they don't
Mhm.
tell you the weighting of any parts.
Yeah,
So I have no concept of you spending 2 hours on the multiple choice part is a good use of time or a
nah,
waste of time.
waste of time.
But if the multiple choice is 50% of the exam or more than 50% of the exam and
I
you've got all of it right, then maybe that was worth it. But because they
I
don't
doubt.
give us any information about that, it's like,
Yeah, nah, I doubt that. Reason being that like the lab one, but there was a lot more of the lab stuff. Like because within each lab, you had like different tasks,
yeah,
right? So that's why I'm guessing the lab will have more weight. And obviously, I couldn't complete most of the labs. I think only lab one I finished all tasks for. The rest, like, oh, at some point I had to stop this one because I couldn't do this. Also, does any of you know how to like refresh your whole um lab? Not the okay, so basically when it got to one of the questions where I had to do with DR,
yep.
I forgot. I thought it was, I remember you guys speaking about how easy it was for you guys, or just three commands. Guess what? I did. I got my DR set up fine. And then they asked me to promote the second one to the first one. And then, yeah, I forgot to generate the key first, but I demoted um my primary already. So then
Okay,
I
here's
couldn't.
a. You don't need to have an active primary to generate a key.
Oh well, I found out like maybe 30 minutes later because
Yeah.
I managed to generate the key then through the UI. But then I couldn't because I had already demoted and then I tried to like even cancel. I ran so many commands that then even with the key, I couldn't promote the second one anymore because I had already
So you
stopped
need
it.
to. So the way that works, you need to create the key on the old primary. So you can still create
I did that.
keys on the primary, and that should. Is it? I think
Can
it's
you
creating the primary, but you.
can you not with unsealed keys or couple keys, whatever you're using?
Yeah,
Can you not
you
just
can
do
do it
that
with the unsealed keys.
on any secondary? Because you demote the
I
You
primary.
need to use, yeah, you need to use
yeah,
the unsealed keys of the primary though, because
Yeah.
when you set up DR, they all merge the same unsealed key. So you can on the secondary
exactly.
create a promotion key and promote. So you don't need to have a batch token with the promotion policies attached to it already, because
Ah,
they assume that not everyone will be organized enough to have these batch tokens ready and in a secure place, so you can generate it with the unsealed keys. You just need to have access to them, or recovery keys, depending on how your vaults are set up.
yes, I wish I knew that before I had already tried different stuff. So because I was like, oh snap, I forgot to generate the key. So rather than just try to generate regardless, I decided, okay, you know what? Let me promote this the first one back to what it was, and then it didn't allow me. And then I was like, okay, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna seal it. I'm going to just I wanted to restart the whole thing, like that whole container. I just wanted to restart it, thinking that me restarting it would give me like as if it will bring it back to what it was before. After restarting, it wasn't, and then I ran some commands to stop the PR. So which meant obviously even after I generate the key, I couldn't use it anymore because I had already deactivated it. So and then I now tried to activate it. That didn't work, and I was just like, you know what, time is going. I give up.
Okay.
Uh,
I
yeah.
get the process though of not allowing you to reset a lab, because if you're meant to be doing this professionally,
Mm.
you wouldn't have the option just to wipe your vault instance and
Yeah.
go again, and it's not meant to reflect
So
You
professional
how
circumstances.
would you fix that? How can I fix that? I couldn't fix it. I
You
tried
could
to
fix
seal
it.
it,
Sealing
and
it
it's
won't
only
help.
after the exam I now remembered what we did in the Hashi guild. I could have just removed all the vault data in the data file in the data directory, and then just did vault.
but but the
If you're trying to do disaster recovery, removing all your vault data doesn't solve your problem.
I know it won't solve it, but I was just assuming it would do something. Anyways, what I learned from that vault exam is that it does make sense. I mean, the exam is made for people that actually work with vault, not people like myself, wannabe vault experts. So definitely, anybody who planning on taking it, study a lot more than I did, and maybe you should be using it on a daily basis. That
it
might help.
I think there's the difference between like going through a lab
Mm.
because you did a course, you like did all the labs going with it, and then actually in your own environment going, how do I set up DR? How do I demote one, promote another? And it's so easy to leave the docs part of their website and into the tutorials part of their website and follow the tutorials when it's oh no, I won't have that on the actual exam.
Right. All I can say is during the exam, I was thinking, why did I listen to both of you? You both made it sound like it was like a walk in the park. And yeah, well, all I can
I
say
don't know if
is
they've passed yet. I've checked my
I'm
emails and
I'm
I still haven't heard anything back.
I am positive you passed.
My
And then I
only
felt,
I was
yeah,
I'm pretty sure my only advice to you before you start the exam was spin up lots of clusters and go through like 4 or 5 use cases, like setting up DR and all that sort of stuff. So it's second nature by the time you enter.
yeah. But the only thing I really practiced really well was transit. Remember, that was the first thing you told me, and I literally did the transit part, and that was no issue. Yeah, but the rest, boy, I really needed the documentation for almost every command, everything.
I think I
Oh,
I think I used the documentation for most of it.
yeah. Oh, there was one part as well. I felt like it was a bit interesting. Was snapshot. For some reason, I didn't remember how to do the snapshot, and I couldn't find anything. I mean, in the normal documentation, I couldn't find anything on it, but in the API, there was commands for it, but I couldn't really I couldn't convert what I was looking at in the API to put it into the stanza, like into because I had the feeling that for you to set up snapshot, you needed to put it into the raft stanza part underneath. No.
No,
So what was it?
it's just an API call. Or you can use the CLI Vault, right?
Yeah, because it's
Well,
The same with the audit devices. They don't live in the stanza. They are part of the configuration. You form them using Vault commands. if you ever set up an additional audit device, or if you ever set up any audit devices, because there's none set up by default.
Ah, I see.
That's
Well,
when you use
that
Terraform.
was fun. That
Mhm.
was fun.
That would be fun if they gave you Terraform in the exam, the Terraform docs to manage it as well.
Nah,
Yeah, nah,
they would never assume Terraform knowledge to do the VOG exam.
fair,
Yeah,
fair.
I'm not saying they assumed it. I remember doing stuff when I did some aqua certs. They essentially said provision this, and you can use whatever tools you want to do it. So if you were really comfortable with Terraform, they have a Terraform provider written. They would have been perfectly happy if you spun up their environment using Terraform, and it was passed as
Yeah.
long as like the end product was in desired state. They didn't really mind how you get there. I think a lot of people do manage Vault through Terraform. It's a fairly
Or
sort of
it's
similar
the
skill set.
recommended way,
Yeah.
you know. I'm just having a
Makes
stroke
sense
of
that
sorry.
way. Makes sense.
It'd be
But yeah,
nice if they let you do it in the exam.
did you guys after the exam then go and try to study PKI afterwards? Because I literally went through a course bit today on PKI. So not not necessarily bot related, but I just because I realized that I don't know anything about certs at all.
I suppose PKI is SSL. I have banged my head against SSL so much that I'm like relatively confident that I could debug it. And the fact that last couple of weeks I've had to debug something, I think I managed to work it out. Because yeah, it's PKI cert stuff is if it
I think
works,
I
it
now
works.
know. Yeah, I now know enough about it that I can probably get to the bottom of it, but I don't know enough about it that I can get there quickly. I think I'd like to learn more about OpenSSL and how to use that effectively to read
Yeah,
certs and get the information out of it, because they're just base 64 encoded, I believe. So you can read a lot of the data out of them, stuff like accepted domain names and expiry dates and stuff like that. And those are the bits that are generally
So
issues or certificate chains.
if you're on a Windows computer, Windows will tell you all the information.
yeah,
If
exactly. You can get that. So
actually
the
no
course I was
no
looking
Chrome
at,
will.
the guy used the Windows because in Windows there's a section for certification manager or
So
cert manager.
Chrome will. I don't know how long it took you guys to see my screen. But Chrome, I suppose I could show over Discord as well. Chrome will show you this, so you can access
Yeah.
the full root and all the certification fields just within the browser.
No, I was using that the other day to get serial numbers of certs to revoke a load that needed to be replaced because they'd been misconfigured or would change what we wanted the address to be called.
Something
So old ones out, new ones in.
something I didn't realize. I think it's this authority information access is a URL of where you can download the parent cert. So you can actually, if you need to if the intermediary isn't set up correctly, also if the chain isn't set up correctly, so you have to download all the cert, you have to download the certs to make it happy. There's actually the block which tells you what the next one in the chain is. So you can just go up, download every cert, install it manually, and then get your padlock if you have a long chain of certs and
Wow,
a no CA chain.
nah, that's cool. That's long. But yeah, I mean, let's wrap up Vault. Vault has been a interesting one for me, I guess for you guys as well. Um, the next thing I actually wanted to talk about would be the Terraform actually published a blog recently about Terraform Cloud no code. Has any of you used no code before?
Yes.
No, some. Oh, have you?
Yeah,
Um,
tell us about it.
because it's something that um, it seems Terraform is pushing, so I was like, okay, I have a use case. I'll just I've written the Terraform code instead of making a workspace for it. I'll just deploy it straight from the module, which is their kind of no code. You build the module, click a button, and it gets deployed. So this was a boundary thing. I wanted to build the the org within Boundary at a no code level. So if you want to build another org, you just click some buttons in Terraform and it spins up. And actually, it is really nice. If you wanted a way of giving devs or users a 2-3 button way of building the entire application, perfect. The problem with it, which I don't know if it's something that has changed, it's a couple months since I've messed with it, is I found a bug in the code I'd written, unsurprisingly, and there was no way of me pushing another version or updating the version of the no code that I've already deployed. I had to delete it and recreate it. So I couldn't just
Interesting.
tell it to be like, oh, point to module version 5 instead of module version 4. I
So that
just had to
means
delete
when
it.
you're publishing it, you're not publishing using version, like when you're publishing modules.
So I can't remember if you have to tell your module that it can also be no code, but it's just the normal module versioning, and then it's a way of generating a workspace that instead of pointing to a Git repo, it just points to the module. But
Does it
it's
track state in the same way?
yeah. So you've got your state file. It's exactly the same as a normal workspace. You're just locked to a module version.
Yeesh. Because
Um,
initially, yeah, I was thinking it's something that we could use because obviously self-service is it's a big thing on like client projects. So
it's one of the best
rather than using,
self-service news I've heard. Uh, AWS Service Catalog now supports Terraform, which is like, like that is a game changer in like, because AWS self-service is really nice because it's just like here's AWS, everyone uses it, the client is already expecting it. So being able to click Service Catalog and get Terraform pooped out. I've not used it. I don't know how it connects to everything, but it connects, and that's the
I
same
think we
low
could
code.
maybe we could do a lab session on that.
Yeah, try and look into it.
Hmm.
Um, that's the same low code as Terraform is. The same as Terraform Cloud is. It's just like here's a block of code, click a button, deploys it.
Hmm.
Though I'm kind of
Okay.
curious if they've changed it to allow um, version numbers.
It would seem an odd thing to leave out indefinitely. I can see why they potentially wouldn't be part of the first releases, but I would be very surprised if it wasn't on their sort of release pipeline or their release
I would,
train to
if they have a
put it
way
in.
of on the like module push, going like on the new module version push, like almost forcing all the low code modules to update.
I guess that'd be a latest tag, which I don't do the module support latest tags in the same way like Docker images do.
No,
So I know Packer images have a latest now. So you can push a new Packer image and it will, if people are using the latest tag, it will just pull the updated version, which is nice. But so they have it elsewhere.
it's really funny though. Is even with the modules, there's a Terraform working directory linked. God, they've made
Hmm.
so many like updates to Terraform. They keep releasing new things. That I'm like, need to do more stuff like run triggers. All that stuff is fun.
Okay. Anyways, um, I was thinking like in terms of what Barnaby was asking earlier before we went live in regards to managing big application infrastructure. What did you mean by that?
So we all sort of talk to the DevOps way of working that you have things that don't really have that much data on them. They're ephemeral infrastructure. You tear things down and then just redeploy them. And it sounds great. And when you can do that, it works really well. But it's not all of your infrastructure can just be torn down and spun up again, because somewhere you'll have your data or state, whatever you wish to call it. And how do you manage the infrastructure that houses that information through Terraform? Is it something that you should do? Because it's nice to have everything in one estate so you can manage it centrally, but then these are things that if you're managing with Terraform's pretty happy about destroying and recreating things, and all it takes is someone to not really pay attention to a plan out if you don't have anything like Sentinel policies in place to block it, to just destroy it. So what are your thoughts on sort of managing infrastructure that holds states, and what sort of things would you put in place to try and stop yourself losing what could be critical customer data or an important part of your app that will take a long time to rebuild?
It's funny, you're talking about important apps. All I can think about is the Minecraft server that we've got up that has all the like world and player data sitting in a store in a EFS. And I suppose the reason why my brain go into that, there was a point where that application was on an EC2 box that was vaguely managed by Terraform, if that, because I didn't want there to be a chance because um, Minecraft crashes. Minecraft crashes quite a lot. It's when you're running it in a cheap way, Minecraft isn't the most stable if you're asking a lot from it. And I was like, well, if it's in something like ECS and it dies, the data gets lost. So you need actual like storage for it. So it was on an EC2 for a while, and I moved it off. It's coming now in EFS with the ECS backend, so it can crash and spin back up as much as it wants, but the data's saved. And I don't think I actually have anything stopping the Terraform destroy. I know you can use, is it life cycles? You can tell it to
Yeah,
not destroy. I know some things Terraform will not destroy by default, like S3.
yeah. There's a
So saying
prevent
that.
lifecycle prevent destroy block that you can add to a resource, and it will error out. It's not particularly the most graceful thing, in, but it works, and you'll see it kick in, and what happens is your plan will go error, and you'll just get a thing saying lifecycle prevent destroy. This resource has been trying to destroy it, and that's it. So it won't necessarily tell you what it's trying to do, which can be a bit irritating because sometimes you're like, I haven't really changed that much. Why is it trying to destroy this resource? But you just get an error saying it's trying to destroy it. You don't see the plan change in a block, which is where I think they try and make the money with the enterprise features with Sentinel, where you can have the plan and then you can scan through the plan for destroy actions and block certain ones, but you still get to see the plan.
Yeah.
In those cases, you just get told that you failed the Sentinel policy, so you can't apply. Or depending on how you apply your Sentinel policy, you might be able to override it or ignore it, but you will at least get an audit log saying this is failed a policy. You maybe don't hit that button that says let's go and
Well,
maybe apply these changes.
that's the other benefit if you make it a warning policy. So you can override it, or maybe say an admin can override it. Is if you have the life cycle of don't destroy, you need to run two plans. So you need to run two applies for your resource to be destroyed. Which I know sounds like not a lot, but it's extra time that maybe you don't need when actually getting an admin to just be there that can click the button or break glass or however you want to do it can sometimes be easier with more auditability.
Because I think I have a branch of code somewhere. I have my main module, which has prevent destroys on some important bits of important resources, and then I have another branch which is just called allow destroy, where those blocks are removed. So if anything's ever getting destroyed, I go, oh, I wonder, or it's getting there. I was like, what's going on here? I just switch my, I think I'm using Jenkins to run it. So switch Jenkins over to that branch and go have at it. The
Just hope it
pipeline I
doesn't
use
plan.
is only has a plan
Oh,
block in it, so it's
Well, that makes
fairly
sense. That's
safe.
fine.
But it still, that code lives there, and there's well, there's a few preventions to try and stop people running that in like a branch with apply allowed, but they're not very strong, and it's sort of something that's necessitated for me to read those outputs. So because if we had something weird with the state on one of the blocks, so we had to go in and see what the plan was trying to do to understand what needed to be fixed in the state. So I think this is where enterprise features are useful. Have you had any stateful applications, Wally, that you need to, or stateful infrastructure that you need to keep alive?
Uh, on my current project, the only thing I can think about is the S3 buckets. But that one I don't really have to worry about because sometimes when you're trying to destroy, if there's something in there, it lets you it won't destroy it. So I have to manually go in there,
Yeah,
remove
AWS
the
can't
files.
destroy a
Yeah.
Yeah,
bucket with objects. Well,
So
that's on the you can, but it's I don't think Terraform
no, there is
can
there is
take.
Terraform doesn't.
Terraform
Terraform doesn't let
can.
you.
There is an extra Terraform line that will clean the bucket up before it gets destroyed.
Really?
Yes, but don't use it. That's not a sensible thing to be using. Unless it's
Tell me
truly an
about it.
ephemeral S3 bucket.
What's the line?
I don't know. I
It'll be in
believe
the
there is.
provider docs.
Yeah, I'll check it out because I definitely want it. Sometimes when we're creating what do you call it, EMRs, yeah, you need to like remove certain S3 folders, and yeah,
Yeah,
it makes
the
sense.
the wrong
I
S3.
like I came to sort of DevOps from an Azure background, and the one thing I do like about Azure over AWS is the resource groups, where
I
one you can put everything in a resource group and you just click delete and it goes.
Oh,
it's
Which
amazing.
for testing and deving stuff is great because you put everything into one resource group, you do whatever you want in there. You don't really have to remember what it is that you've done. You hit delete and it's just gone. Everything's gone. Nothing's built. No worries.
so
AWS, you have bits and bobs left everywhere. So what I did when I got my AWS, I installed something called Cloud Nuke, which will just go and wipe an AWS account for you. But I think it'll wipe a whole region. It's not particularly picky about it. You can
you have to be
have
very
sort of,
careful if you use
yeah,
SSO to not wipe out your SSO. um,
Exactly.
yeah.
the tag, if you're curious, for S3 is
Mhm.
called force destroy. Boolean that indicates all objects, including a locked object, should be deleted from the bucket when the bucket is destroyed.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is how you're
All
going to
right.
ruin your client's day.
Nah, to be honest, I work mainly in and so we have multiple environments. So I don't touch, and actually the only place the way they can be impacted would be pre-prod and prod. Everything else, fine.
Did you just say and prod, which is arguably the most important environment?
I'm just saying, like in
no
terms
one,
of where I could actually mess up. Obviously,
no one cares about
I don't.
prod.
Those are
Don't
the,
worry.
yeah, those are the two places. That obviously, you won't find me doing that. But every other environment, yeah, I'm happy to do whatever I need to do.
From
But yeah,
hearing about your crazy merging strategies, you leaving some code in a dev branch, like the possibility of it making it into prod without anyone noticing that it's there is quite high.
oh yeah, 100%. But with prod, our prod deployments are a bit more stricter. So in terms of what goes in there, I feel like unless you're inexperienced, it shouldn't happen because you actually create a brand new branch. Obviously, based on what we currently have, you create a brand new branch and you actually technically, you write your code again in there. So
It's
it's not a case where like you're promoting a branch into that change that you're creating. You're literally
it's
putting your
worth
code in there.
it's worth saying that's a stupid idea. If anyone's watching, don't do that.
But then again, like if you're not in control, like me, for example, it's based on what the client is already doing. And we
it's
are migrating away from that, but it's still something we still have to do right now. So,
if you're not able to line releases up correctly, and actually Terraform released a blog earlier today, I think. Though I think it was a rehash of a blog I've seen before about how you should run your platform teams like
Oh yeah, I
product
read that.
teams.
Yeah.
Um, if you can't do that, so everyone's like everyone's hitting environments at different times and like racing to get to the end. That's when copy and paste between environments can work, but it's always a bad idea.
I mean, that's what remember, like, I mean, you worked with us for a bit. You know that like most of the repositories we are here and other teams are also touching them. So I think in this case, I mean, it's not ideal, but it works.
Yeah,
Once we move to the new branching strategy where we're creating releases and all that stuff, and we already have it in one repository and it's already proven really,
yeah.
really difficult for some people.
So
So yeah.
isn't it you dev on your everyone devs on their own dev branches, they have their test environments, and then once they've passed their test, it gets put into the release branch, and that release branch should go through the various testing environments until like you go, all right, everything to go into the release branch goes in on Friday, and then next week
The
that slowly moves up the
Nah,
environment.
the
nah.
problem, so I suppose two problems with that. Um, One is you end up with a lot of workspaces. If dev needs to have like 10 workspaces because of each person deving, um, which is
Mm.
fine. It just uh, if you're doing if you're paying for Terraform, they normally charge for workspaces, so it gets quite expensive. Um, the other thing is that works really well until there's a stop at the end where you've got release control, change control, change management, where it's like, cool, you've got to the end, now write some documentation. Until the documentation's done, you can't get into production. So it,
Oh,
Surely you surely you
that's
should shift
actually
that left.
I don't even mind that actually. That's actually not the main problem we have. And also based on what Barnaby just said, in terms of different you create your own branch, different branches where you actually work on, and then when you're happy with it, you push it to dev, right? And then from there you create a new release. Problem we're having is that we have a separate repository that manages um that manages where the release is pointing to. So what the release is equivalent to. So right now, if I
When
have
you
release
say release,
20, yeah, if I create a release basically off of, let's
but a
say, I just create
but a release should be
release
a
would,
tag, not a
no, in this
branch.
case, yeah, it's a branch really. It's actually a branch that we're using it. You know, you can create different types of branches um in Bitbucket, for example. So in this case, we create it as a release, but then that release will not be equivalent to an environment.
Yeah.
So now the problem is that I'm now saying, okay, you know what? My release 20, the changes in there, I only want up to test environment. So that's it now. But then anybody else that now wants to actually is ready to move their code past, test and maybe move it to pre-prod and prod, they are not affected by me because that means either I have to remove my code or they have to create a brand new release, but not off my release. So my release won't be their base release to go off. They'll have to go based off another release entirely where my
So
change is not in there.
I think
So
I think that's where the running a platform team like a product it would break that in a way. So you're kind of like you have a 2 week sprint, and then this is how much work we're going to get done in the sprint, and at the end of that day, that's when you bundle up the work into a release, and then you send that release to go into test, and then pre-prod prod, but you're kind of bottlenecking all the work, so you're not going everyone just go into test and dev and whatever when you want. There's no um, stopping once the work is done and you're happy with it. There's no stopping till it's in production.
I have a problem with that. So we have different skill set in our team. So the problem with that is that, s- mm, okay, so some
No, so
people
this is
will not
the
test properly,
this is
and
the
then that means,
ideal life.
yeah,
I understand
yeah,
ideal is different to
yeah,
thing,
nah,
and
this
there
won't
is
work.
a there's a level where if the release is done, I mean, I suppose there's a level of if you're going to run like a product team, you need regression testing, you need like full testing suite, like you should have for an application. Which maybe someday we should have a actual full talk on testing in
Characters.
DevOps, because no one does it. No one. I don't think Terra test is necessarily the right answer.
I was trying to do lookup testing for Jenkins, and there's no like native Groovy testing language. It's just not really done. All of it is how to write tests for the application to run in Jenkins. It's not actually how to test your Jenkins code as well. So it just goes, yeah, run it and see if it works. Like, well, that's not going to catch any of the edge cases, is it?
Yeah, we tell our developers they need to test. We write all the code to test their work, but yet we don't test that our stuff's working. I suppose that the problem I have with Terra test is it fully spins up an environment, tests it's correct, and then destroys it. So unless you have a AWS environment that is purely there for spin up and tear down, and then you also need your code to be parallelizable, so you could have like 3 versions of the same infrastructure in the same cloud account to truly get the like benefit of stuff like Terra test, where you can be like, cool, I want to run a pipeline every 10 minutes and run Terra test every 10 minutes. But if your full application takes 3 hours to deploy or 40 minutes or whatever, you're getting away from the benefits of stuff like Terra test. The way that one of the other clients I've done, which is the client Wiler's on, is you have code that tests what's live, which is good, but that's something that kind of almost scheduled overnight is necessary because it takes so long in a large application. But in the actual testing world, I'm not a tester, I know this because my wife is a tester, so I hear these things, is actually you run like a release before a proper release goes out. They will do nightly testing of all their full website, like make sure all the edge cases end to end, all that sort of stuff. And then the next day they'll look through all the logs and go, cool, how much of this do we care about? What tests to find to go into production? All that. What do we actually need to fix? All that fun stuff.
Yeah, I remember the first client I ever worked, we had a test suite that, because we were managing the devs infrastructure, it was all shut down overnight and spun up because the devs didn't work. They worked 9 to 5. So at 6, their test environments that they were deving on were torn down and would be spun up at 8 the next morning, because why pay for them for the sort of 16 hours of the day that they're not being run? Saves a load of money doing it. But part of that spin up process is we had a load of tests written in a language called inspec that would go on and check all the services were connected and making the right API calls. So we'd come on the morning if we ever had a dev go, our testing site's not working, we could go and look at our test suite, turn around to them and go, no, your test environment is working perfectly fine. Something in the code that you've written is not working. Which was 90% of the time it was the dev's code. But I remember before we had these scheduled, it was a nightmare because the dev would come and go, it's not working. And we're like, do you mean it's not working? So, yeah, my environment's broken. And they'd spend a couple of hours debugging it and doing all of this to find out that they'd written something that couldn't compile, and then tried to push it to the test environment. And just like being able to turn around and go, yeah, no, your environment's fine, was so useful, saved us so much time. And also, if someone came to us and goes, we've got a problem, we had the list of tests and we could go, oh yeah, your one didn't boot correctly, we're sorry, we'll fix it. And you could see exactly what it was. It made everything so much quicker having that testing pipeline in place.
That's when you then get into the chat ops, where it then sends you a message when one of the servers fails.
We had it set up to push to our Slack channel. If any of them failed in the morning, it sent a little important alert to our main Slack channel saying, these servers have failed because if the servers would fail, it would mean a dev was going to come complaining that we were blocking them.
Yeah.
So
This
that
person
would
can't
be
work
first
today.
priority in the morning. Yes. So
That's good.
I think
Yeah,
that was a
we'll get
nice
there
way
one
of
day.
testing in DevOps. But still,
Once
that was only
we,
testing post live. It wasn't testing updates. They were still tested in the same way that you made code changes, did a test run on a testing environment that was in your estate, and then ran the tests on that to see if the end product that wasn't sort of a separate test pipeline that you could push code and it would run the whole lot of tests and go great. It was still quite a manual process testing new code.
mm, um, what was I gonna say actually? Yeah, in terms of my client right now, once we get to testing phase, I'll let you know. But right now, seems like we're still a long, long way away from it. Well, one more thing that actually I was going to talk about is documentation in regards to like, when you write code, right? Before, testing is important, but documentation is also important. So have you guys heard of TF Docs?
I have used it a couple of times, and it is
Yeah,
very nice
amazing.
if you get it set up correctly. Because one of the
I
things. Oh, okay.
so I was just gonna say like I just used it recently and I loved it. And obviously if you comment if you add description to almost of your code, then
If you
then it's
write your
amazing.
Terraform correctly, TF
Yeah.
Docs does the rest.
Oh my days, it's amazing. Like you don't need to wonder, oh, all the modules that this code this repository is using, it will tell you the versions they are on, so you don't have to go through the code, the inputs and what the outputs, everything. You don't have
another
to worry about it.
another really good thing TF Docs does is you can add another file that TF Docs will import on top of its documentation that it writes. So you're not, because the general thing is you have TF Docs creates your README, which
Yeah.
but that means you lose the like benefit of the README other than all the what the module does. But being able to have like a header file that the TF Docs can load in, you still have the benefit of the README of like what the hell does this code actually do, and then all the like these are what the variables mean, this is what the outputs are, all that sort of stuff.
No, I mean, what you could do is, what I did was actually I wrote what I wanted to write about, like the module initially, like what the module is and whatever. And then at the bottom of it, it adds this comment section saying TF docs starts from here. So then, like, even if I regenerate TF docs, is always
Yeah.
going to regenerate in that section rather than overriding what I did because initially I put my comment at the bottom. So now I run it again and everything's gone. So yeah, but TF docs, and it's not just good. It's not just for modules, by the way. It works for anything, anything Terraform, obviously.
There's not a lot
Like,
in Terraform that's not a module.
yeah. So no, I'm just saying because initially I only wanted it because I wrote a module, and then I was too lazy to actually write the documentation, and then I joined one of Brian Krausen's talk where they were just talking about cool Terraform tools or in general tools in general. So and TF Docs was mentioned, and since then I've been a fan.
So it's interesting, the TF Docs output is very similar to just like the standard TFE, Terraform Enterprise, Terraform Cloud module output. Like you can see kind of the same information.
Mhm.
If you just kind of go into a module, you can see all the inputs, outputs, dependencies, and stuff. Just obviously TF Docs makes it in a way that is useful for open source stuff and seeing the information at Git level.
The only challenge that might be is obviously we can use it for ourselves, but obviously you might want to use it on the client side. So if you might find it hard to download it onto your client laptop. So that might
I
be a
think
challenge.
something you can do at client side, which are more for is getting linters installed, and a lot of linters will prompt you to add descriptions to your code. So even if you're or README isn't perfectly up to date, if all your descriptions are accurate, yeah, obviously Linter won't know if the descriptions are accurate, but generally if someone's forced to write a description, they'll go and write something that's useful instead of just putting an empty string, although there will be some people out there that just don't want to be helpful. But those were another good way to try and encourage writing of docs. You can also enforce stuff like changelog updates and stuff in your merge controls or your
Also
pull
making
requests.
sure your file names are useful, so people can find your variables and your module. Like anytime you're using module names, cool things that are sensible. It makes everyone's life easier. Descriptions shouldn't be needed, but
Yeah,
they're nice.
I read something a while back that they were saying that in a way you should try and write your code in a way that you don't need to write any comments
Yeah,
because you should have
Which
sensible
means
variable
give them.
names.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yeah, sensible variable names and write, even if they're not necessarily the most efficient use, write it in a way that's sort of more human readable. Because although comments are nice, what often happens if you write a comment when you start, you come in, then you change the code's behavior later on, you might not, a lot of people just go, oh, it works now, and not update the comment. So the comment will be wrong, but the code's changed. Whereas if your variable names are written sensibly and you're writing your sort of conditionals in a sensible way, by changing the way the code works, you also change the documentation, which is the code at
living
the same time.
documentation. It's fun. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what.
oh, I was gonna say it's an DevOps, but I wonder if because it used to be you should have short variable names.
Yeah.
So they weren't particularly useful. Obviously, hard drives are small, so saving data is probably useful. And uh, back before IntelliSense was a thing where you could you could start typing and it would just auto complete the variable name. Having short variables were useful, but now I think the suggestion is have them as long as you want. There's no reason to have a short variable name as long as it makes sense.
I guess in an uncompiled language, it will use up a tiny bit more memory, but it won't make a difference. If you're using a language that gets compiled, then it doesn't make any difference how long your variable name is because it gets compiled down in
Hard
any
drive
case.
space.
Hard drives for your code, if you're adding a few
back
bytes in the carrots.
back back before we had reasonable size hard drives.
But the compiled version doesn't hold the variable name.
No, but if you're deving, you've only got so much hard drive
Yes.
space to work on. Not anymore. Obviously, that's not a. We are not in that world anymore.
So let's say if the size of a text document is a consideration for your hard drives, I can't even imagine writing it. My code is often all over the place. Quite long names, all sorts of stuff, extra spaces, loops, and stuff. So I think I probably would eat up those hard drives real quick if I had that kind of
I saw
constraint.
I saw a. This is completely off topic. I saw a LinkedIn post earlier that was saying about how energy efficient all the different programming languages are.
Oh
And
yeah.
looking at it, it's like,
Yeah.
I wonder if in the next kind of 10 years we're going to go back to mostly compiled languages just because they are a lot, well, who knows? Supposedly they're less energy intensive.
Well, I guess it'd be which ones run faster. So I imagine something like C would probably be pretty high
Yeah.
up because it's got no bloat in there. But then it's a lot harder to write C than it is to write Python because you have no error handling by default. You have to compile it.
So C++
You have to
was like too lower, which is probably more useful.
I've never messed around with C++. I remember writing in C and going, "This is a nightmare," but boy, does it run fast when it runs.
What I was
So
surprised was like Go was in the middle. I was like, oh, I thought Go would be a little bit better.
I think Go's got quite a bit of like built-in to protect like handrails,
Yeah,
which is probably why it's a little bit slow. I imagine Python's probably right down the bottom.
yeah. It was like 10 times worse. No, it was 40 times worse than C. In whatever the scale means. Like I don't even really trust the data is accurate. I just think it's an interesting thing of the like, if this is true, the route we're going is going to be back to compiled. Which I suppose means
Like
maybe CDKs can become more useful as we start compiling our HCL code.
I wonder if stuff where you'll have sort of something like the equivalent of Chat GPT, so you can write in Dev and test your code in Python, which is nice and easy to write, and then you'll pass it to an AI that then strips it all down to like bare
I
bones
mean,
C code that just has the functionality you need.
you're talking about ChatGPT, but that could just be a compiler. You could just make something that
Yeah,
can compile Python into C.
well, Python's written in C, so it kind of
Yeah,
already is in a weird way. But I guess it's having something that's smart enough to take out the handrails for you in a way that doesn't break things as you're going. Because it's kind of the handrails that are the additional bloat that costs you compute.
yeah. That's right. Sustainability. It's an interesting subject of which I wish there was more information to like find
Or
about what it actually means.
or you could just be lazy or try and do it the other end and beat the just make sure you have all green energy you produced because then it doesn't really matter quite how much
So there's,
how energy efficient, although it will be compute efficiency. So you'll get a little bit of efficiency. You'll be able to run more programs on the same silicon.
I think, so. I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but I personally think there's more sustainability than the energy used of the like the cost of hardware and all that sort of stuff. Like there is a there's a cost to running on a beefy computer, and there's also a
Hmm.
cost. There's a cost to running anything. Like I'm really curious the like full sustain. Like if we looked at a major application system and it's like sustainability, like the three-tier app with multiple different cloud services connecting all together. I'm really curious if the applications, the energy sink, the sustainability cost, or if it's all of it, or if it's the data transfer. Like there's so much in a system, and I haven't really seen anything. And I'm sure I could find it if I look deep enough, but I haven't really seen anything surface looking that's kind of like how sustainability hits each part.
Yeah, you end up getting to really sort of interesting questions like, are you better to pin a smaller CPU to 100% utilization or have a bigger one running at sort of 60% utilization?
Yeah. Are you better off having full on memory storage and offloading data every so often, or should you be firing API requests to a database? Everything like it's a really interesting subject, which I feel like a lot of people are going. It's about the box that the thing sits on, um, but most applications are always
Also,
up. So how many cycles it runs is less useful, I feel.
yeah, sort of full system thinking, which is often left out because I guess, it's kind of the opposite way the industry is heading because the industry is kind of like build your microservices and then don't worry about the rest of the system, just plug them in all in together. So you don't have the full picture of often of you don't necessarily think about the interaction like yes, my box runs really efficiently, but maybe the calls it makes are very expensive because they have to go through lots of network hops.
Yeah, and even as we're going away from microservice into serverless, where you have your ephemeral lambdas that spin up for a minute or whatever to do the call and then shut down. Like, because then obviously you've got hundreds and thousands of lambdas just sitting there waiting to go.
Mm.
Like
I
the
guess it's not a huge difference from the Kubernetes pods if you micro architect it. It's just someone else is taking care of the orchestration for you there.
yeah, I suppose the in a sustainability level, there's a point where if your lambda's not running, that compute could be used by someone else. But I don't know
Yes.
how AWS does all this stuff. Well, any thoughts about sustainability? Or with I don't know if we're off topic or not.
No, I'm just listening in. No thoughts on that at all.
Enjoying the
I mean, the
tangent.
only time I had to think about it is when I'm not sure if you guys were part of it when we had a talk with Meta. I mean, not talk, but they were doing a presentation and they were talking about the environment, and I think they mentioned codes as well. And that's the only time I actually came across it. So yeah,
Yeah, I think I I saw something that was built where kind of you could add it as a plugin to your website, and it kind of tell you how expensive your website was to run for the planet based on sort of load times asset loaded, and it kind of work out the background compute cost and give you a carbon CO2 kind of footprint of your website, which is quite a cool tool.
That's cool.
That's actually cool. Speaking about cool tools, are there any other cool tools that you guys know that will be useful for DevOps? Like, I mean, TFDocs is one of them.
So for Terraform, you've got tfdocs, tflint, tfsec.
TFEnv for changing different versions
I
as
know
well.
Jeff's trying to build something for Vault that maps out policy paths from policy and gives you a more detailed drill down into it. So it kind of it spans out some of the wildcards, and I think he's trying to put in how the various rule hierarchy overlaps, because I don't know how deep you guys have drilled into Vault policy and the different rules, but the way they interact with each other is not always obvious from just the written policy. There's some weird rules that go on in the background for how some supersede others.
Yeah, I imagine a way of being able to go like, here's my token. What can it do? What can it see? Would probably be quite a nice tool within Vault.
Wait,
Although the flip side to
Vault
that is that
token lookup doesn't
No,
do the job?
that
no.
will give you the policies, but you can't necessarily read the policies. But then you get into a security considerations of if you can just see what a token can do, it makes it very well considerably easier if someone acquires a token to find out what they can do with it. Because if you get a token at the moment, you can look at the policies, but they don't necessarily give you any reference or any paths. So
Can't
a lot of the
necessarily
times
see
you,
the policy.
yeah,
Wait, can you, James, you know how to write plugins. Is that something that you could work on?
No, this would be I think an external tool would be a better thing. Oh, like like Barnaby was saying, Jeff, a
Sure.
guy I worked
Hmm.
with. So obviously making something where you can put in policies and it'll be like, this is the path this person can see, which would be
Yeah.
cool.
Uh,
And
yeah.
Vault plugins can't. Is this right? Yeah, Vault plugins can't access each other's data. So you can't, if you load in a malicious plugin to Vault, I do not
yes,
believe it will be able to access anything else's data.
if you could access this raw, then maybe, but I don't think you can give it access to that by
No, so
default or access.
the plugin gets a like cordoned off part of the logical storage, and that's all that it
Yeah,
can save and read data to.
Hmm. Fair enough.
I'm sure there's a
Me,
way of doing something weird and getting access to more than you should be able to, but by default you shouldn't be able to.
fair enough. You're the expert. I haven't touched up on it so far.
I have written one plugin, and that one wasn't too crazy. I think expert's a little bit of a stretch.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. One thing we should definitely look into is maybe like one day we should be able to go through the issues that some of the providers have, and maybe we could, pick one of them and try and work through it. That'll be fun.
Yeah, the issue I find is lots of the issues are really like esoteric. It's like I don't understand what this person's trying to do. Um, but maybe one day.
Uh, yeah, exactly. One day. That's the aim. But yeah, I guess this is where we need to wrap it up.
Yeah, we've hit the hour.
We did over. Yeah, it's been fun. So yeah,
Should I
James.
close? So everyone, thank you very much for watching. We are hopefully going to put this episode on YouTube, assuming we remember to uh, record it this time. So we're on YouTube.
Oh,
Hello YouTube if you're there. Follow, like, comment. The algorithm cares.
Subscribe.
Hit the
It's the one you're
subscribe
looking
button.
for.
Hit the
Subscribe.
bell over there.
Dingle the bell. Uh, Thank you everyone for watching on Twitch. Follow. We can't subscribe on Twitch yet. Why do they make all the words so similar? And we will see you next week for more Devcastops. Bye.
Bye.